Do I need this or?
Yeah, go with this one.
Okay.
Or you can put this one down if you want.
Okay. Can you hear me? Good morning, creatives. I always have felt that creative people are the nicest people in the world. And this room is I mean, that you're all up at 8:30 is amazing to me, too. It's like, wow. Anyway, change is kind of a hard topic to address. It probably is the only thing we know about, even including the cosmos, that's inevitable. And so it's really important to think about change and make sure that what we're doing is actually going forward and what we're doing is making a positive change. I want to talk to you today about the Riverwalk, because this is a project that I've been working on. I started working on it 15 years ago. We had little projects, if you can believe it. They were so small. For example, let me give you an example. You may have gone by this every day and not known it was even a project. The railings on the Michigan Avenue Bridge, the DuSable Bridge, were originally made out of pieces of steel that were riveted together, but what the designer didn't anticipate was that when the trucks and cars crossed the bridge, they'd shake the rivets loose in this very little ornamental steel. So by the time, the bridge was a few years old, they had fallen apart and they'd been replaced by an ugly modern railing. We were commissioned by the Chicago Department of Transportation to do something about that, to replace it with a historic rail. And we cast them in aluminum. That's a little change. And a lot of projects like that incrementally added up to what the Riverwalk is now. And last summer was probably the first time that you all could really say, wow, this has really changed. And you may have remembered the Riverwalk like this. This is the block between State and Dearborn. And this is what it looked like this summer. It was like, wow. People couldn't get enough of the $13 a glass wine at City Winery, aptly named River Red and River Rosé. By the way, they're going to be back. The city learned a lot. I think the popularity of the space caught them off guard, but maybe it shouldn't have. To understand how this happened, I think you have to go back in history a little. Even though most people think of Chicago as a city on a lake, birth happened on our riverfront before white guys got here. That was the Native American Center. And the reason is because it was a confluence of the two major rivers of the Great Lakes Illinois watershed. And this little drawing shows the first white man settlement in Chicago, Kinsey's Tavern. Notice it was a tavern. And the river actually fueled Chicago's growth. It was this conduit that made this a commercial city. This is a few years later, 1853. And the banks of the river, and you can see this as you go north and south on the river, became largely industrial. This was the maker part of Chicago. And there were other changes that affected why the river looked like it did when we started. One of the big ones, of course, was the diversion of the Chicago River. We didn't keep the river very clean. A lot of disease caused the people of the day to decide they had to reverse the river. Rather than flushing our sewage into the lake, which was our drinking water, they locked off the part to the lake and dug a couple canals through our watershed so we could send all our sewage down the Mississippi, and then it wasn't a problem to us anymore. This is an interesting topic that you could probably spend a couple of years studying. We're just going to spend a minute. The other thing that changed a lot is as the city grew, the water traffic was less important than the land traffic. And so bridges became extraordinarily important to the functioning of the city. And ironically, we had a city that was divided by a substantial waterway. And bridges became part of our life. There was a lot of planning about what to do to the river. One of the more famous plans was Burnham's plan in 1909. The picture on your left isn't Chicago, that's Paris. And this is earlier, this is about 1893. And the event was the World Exposition in Paris. The Eiffel Tower was built for that expo. And there were two fair sites. You can see them here, the one with the tower and then this other one downriver. And to connect them, the planners built the walkways along the Seine that you know now when you go to Paris. And they were, as a planning idea, they were tremendously popular, very influential on Burnham. And one piece of the Burnham plan, which is the slide on the right, was that he envisioned that the Chicago River would be lined with these absolutely magnificent public promenades. In fact, that is the confluence. He saw the confluence turning into a civic turning basin. Now, not all the ideas of the Burnham Plan were enacted. A lot of them are spiritual rather than physical. But this one was. And in 1926, the city proposed to build that two-level roadway, which was a really modern idea. What it did is it let cars access the city, cars and trucks access this service level, and then there was this upper level, which was the civic level. And the difference between the two levels, you can see it drawn here, became this promenade, this wonderful civic space. And so it's almost looking out the window here. This was 1927 when the Wacker Drive construction was completed, and you can see that they have created that sort of promenade. It's not very wide, but it's there. But a lot of projects happen in bits and pieces, and the next pieces were not very coordinated. The bridges had to be rebuilt. They got busier and busier. Chicago's famous for their trunnion bascule bridges, movable bridges. We have more movable bridges than any other city in the United States. And this is the State Street Bridge. The only thing, if you look here, you can see that the promenade doesn't go through. So that led to the space that we were presented with, this little sort of leftover industrial remnant. People sort of knew it was there. Maybe people went down there when they dyed the river green, but it was a leftover. And it was a leftover in the middle of our city. There were some other complications, though, that you had to solve besides getting past the bridge houses. Right now, you'd walk along that little promenade and you'd come to a stair, a beautiful stair, and you'd have to come back up to the city level. That difference is about 20 feet. So it's not a little bit of difference, you know, going up and down those stairs is not a promenade. That's a workout. The other problem is the planners in their wisdom only left us about 15 feet of arcade and 15 feet of dock, which is not a civic size space. So the city went to, you know, I'm sure you all have projects where you go, oh my God, I'll never get this done. It'll take an act of Congress. This one did. The city had to go to Congress and ask them if they could build some additional land so that they could accomplish two things. One is find a way around the bridge houses, and then the second thing is to get some more space for their promenade. So this is what the city did. They passed a bill, what the Congress did, they passed a bill called the Volpe Act, and it gave the city essentially this build-out limit that you see here. So that was the project, to make new land, useful new land, make a public park, and make a walkable promenade. So we began phase one. The first phase went from Michigan Avenue to Wabash. You can see it there. And it was interesting because this is an irregular part of the river. We invented some stuff to make that work. One is we invented what we started calling an underbridge, a way to get under the bridge. And the canopy was added, by the way, as sort of, you all are too young. Do you know the Dave Matthews Band? Okay, you're not too young. I don't have to say anything else. So we also added a little cover here to keep the bridge from dripping, and other people and things from dripping on you. So that project, which again was a series of small projects, that first part was actually built in 2 separate contracts by 2 separate contractors. That was completed in 2004, and it had some really nice things about it. It had this, you can see it here too. It had this Vietnam memorial. Chicago did have a Vietnam memorial. It used to be up in this little triangle of space on Wacker Drive. And when Wacker Drive was rebuilt under the Daley administration, it disappeared. And the veterans, of course, were really angry because they used to have little ceremonies on this triangle with traffic going all over it. And Daley, very magnanimous. Oh, I have to tell you, that was built by Jane Byrne. And so Daley lost it. And then we built a new one, a new Vietnam Memorial Veterans Plaza. And that's really been one of the nicest spaces. And crazy things happened. People started having their lunch there. It was really full. And Blair Kamen wrote about it after it opened. He said, oh, Chicago has a second coast, the Riverwalk. And when Emanuel was elected, this is Wabash Plaza. I can tell you a whole nother story. It would take an hour about designing a Vietnam memorial in the 21st century, this 20th century event that was so amazing, and then trying to do it in the 21st century is really interesting. Anyway, Emanuel decided that this project was a worthy project. Everything had just crashed down around people's ears economically, but the city decided that this project was going to be one of their shovel-ready projects, one of the infrastructure projects that would bring our economy back. And so we were commissioned to draw. There's no money to build, but we were going to draw. And we would draw a design that would go from Wabash to Lake, which is all the property that the city owns that's publicly owned on the river. For us, it was a tremendous opportunity. We always had an idea about what we wanted to do for the river. A lot of them were just practical things like being able to walk along the river. But this was the first time that we could consider more than a block at a time and really start thinking about the design. So it was a luxury. I have to say here, although it hurts me to admit this is not my thinking alone. I have a cast of thousands. Actually, sometimes they're in front of me as well as behind me. I would particularly like to mention 2 team members, Sasaki Associates, our landscape architect out of Boston, and our local landscape architect who's a genius about plants, Terry Ryan. Everything you see growing down there so vigorously is because of Terry. So having that opportunity, we decided that one thing we had to do was make a continuous walkway, which is the orange here. It had to be continuous. You had to feel like you were always on a path. And the second thing we realized is those bridge houses that we spent so much time getting around also created rooms that could be separate experiences. So after a lot of research, we decided that the rooms fit very well as river typologies, that we could introduce activities based on typical river environments. And so this is the design drawing that was then approved by the city. And interestingly enough, we immediately got some money. By the way, the total cost of this project is about $175 million for the whole thing. It's not as expensive. It's about a quarter of the cost of the High Line, if you're keeping track here. So even though we have no money for pensions, we do some things very, very, very economically. So I'm going to show you what we designed. The first room, which is called the Marina, is designed to allow boats to dock and people to sit. This is the room that City Winery was in last year. When we started the project, the city was adamant that no one would ever pull a boat up along the river. It was dangerous. But by the time the Riverwalk was so popular, we were actually making docks for the boats. And now this is an income source. It's even, and they haven't sold these parking meters, but it's even more than parking your car, which you may not believe, but it's true. They weren't sure about businesses. The city wasn't. There's only 15 feet in that arcade, but City Winery signed up, and the story you know from that point on. And in fact, boats do dock there regularly. So there was a need, and there was a need developing that had to be answered. Sorry, Macs have very, anyway. And what I like about the space is, yes, it's great when it's busy, but if you went down there this morning, it's also a great space. It's a respite in the city. The next room is called the Cove, and this room is dedicated to the accommodation of human-powered craft, say canoes and kayaks. By the way, our public process for this was different than some of the public processes that we have. Sometimes we have public meetings and anybody can come. This one was different because we met with different interest groups like Friends of the River, Friends of Downtown. There is a kayak to work group, just if you're interested in that. And this room is different because it has a freeboard that accommodates kayaks, so we're actually getting down to 1 foot above the typical river level. And the vendor in this block turned out to be a kayak renter, and then Flanders Fries, which was also quite popular. And the quality of this room changes. You can see the plantings change. It gets much closer to the water. We made benches that look like beach stones, and it changes to more of a beach environment. These plants are beach grasses. Oh, you know, the week after the Riverwalk opened, you probably noticed it was completely underwater. And people said, oh my God, that's a design error. How could they do that, spend all that money? The river level varies about 7 feet, depending on when the water's drained after a storm. So everything we do is designed to be inundated. The next room that we finished last year is the River Theater. This is at about the middle of all the blocks we had to work with. And so we decided at this block we wanted to actually bend the city down to the river in a very civic way, a very welcoming way. And our inspiration were other great staircases, the Spanish Steps. We also were impressed that then we could use that as a theater space, and it has been used that way. The only problem we had was that the amount of area that the Congress had given us didn't quite allow for a stair because of the technical requirements for landings and a ramp. The ramp was really important to us because we wanted the space to be available for people with disabilities. And so we designed this. There's a blog on my website. I had one young man, very intelligent, creative guy, who spent like a year figuring out how we could get this to work so beautifully geometrically. And he wrote a blog about it on our site. So if you're a technical type, read it. It's really good. Anyway, but the answer in the end, in simple, was to use risers for stairs in only part of it, and then risers for seating in another part. And that allowed us to accomplish a steeper slope and fit it in there and make it look like it still was sort of planned out and worked. And this room has become tremendously popular. People will just go and sit in the room. And it does, in fact, create that entryway that we were looking for. One of the things also that we were surprised about is the day and night use. We had programmed that in our design, but it was more than we had anticipated. And I think in the next phases, you'll see the city doing more light events and stuff like that, too. And the other kind of interesting thing is Ryan Gann, a person from my office, you can say hi, Ryan. We undertook personal research this winter to find out what happened to the restaurants across the river. And this is only sort of what they told us, as these aren't official numbers. but the across the river restaurants did better, and all the adjacent businesses did better, which shows that this investment of $175 million, you really may not ever be able to even calculate the return. And this is the looked like from City Tavern, River Tavern, or whatever it's called, across the river. What's coming? So that was opened in June of 2015. In September of 2016, this year, we will open the last 3 city blocks of the Riverwalk. And I think you'll find them very, very exciting. The first one is called the Water Plaza. Originally, we wanted to call this the swimming hole with our river typologies. The idea was that if you're walking along the river right now, it's not a good idea to touch it. But that we should feel like we could. And so we called it the swimming hole, and what we had always dreamt about was that we'd have an interactive water feature there. At one point in the design, it was a glass bottom pool, so that you could see the river water under you and you could walk in the water on top. The Coast Guard, who has authority over this thing, said that they didn't want us to call it the swimming hole because people may jump into the river. I know everyone's smarter than that, but although the city has a blind man who's suing them right now, because I think maybe some of you know him. He's down at the river all the time. He wears like a metallic suit. Yeah, and he said he was tapping his way along and he fell in the river. So he wants the city to put railings along the river. I think that would be a huge loss if we did that. But like I said, that's another hour of discussion. Like I said, I wanted to walk on the river. Instead, what we're using is this zero-depth fountain that falls over the plaza. And so maybe you'll feel more like Moses walking through. But you'll be able to run your hand through it. The other thing that is a new experiment in this room is this fountain. We're designing it to stay on during the winter and form ice. And we are looking to program the space, opportunities to program the space for more than our absolutely glorious 6 months of good weather. The next room that'll open is a jetty. This room will include, of all things, fishing, which was sort of the Mayor Daley father idea. He wanted to sit by the Chicago River and cast in and then barbecue his fish up on the bank, which is possible now. You know, the river, as little as 20 years ago, had like 7 species of fish, and they were all carp. And now we have 70, and you can get bluegill, crappie, bass, all that lives in the river. There's still a lot of carp. So this room will recreate, we hope, what a naturalized riverbank, I can do this really screwed up, what a naturalized riverbank will be. And the outer gardens will actually be floating plants, or emergent as they're called. They don't have roots. The roots just hang in the water. Then, submergent. The next one will be emergent plants, which float in the water, but they're actually rooted to some media below. And then the next layer will be inundation tolerant. And in a normal situation, this is how riverbanks in Illinois would develop. And so we're going to present that so you can see it here in the city, even though I'm a Chicagoan, I grew up here, but I always thought it was a Chicago canal. I also never knew why they painted it green, because it was always green. But the other thing that will happen is we're trying to create habitats for fish. The fish are already attracted to this area. Basically, what they do is they eat the crustaceans that live in the roots of the water plants. And we're going a step further. We're providing some habitat for them and lunkers here, where we're cladding our columns, essentially, with steel so that they can have little places to hide and live. And then we're also adding additional food sources. So we're hoping that one of the vendors there is a bait shop, a tackle shop, and that you'll be able to fish in the Chicago River and take it home and eat it. Or maybe somebody will be there to fry it up for you. So, I didn't do that right, did I? Nope. How about enter? Nope. I'm a Mac person. I'm not a Mac person. I'm a PC person myself. I know that sounds, when you're talking to creatives, that's sort of like Yeah, isn't that terrible? Yeah, please. So this was the end of last year. So heartbreakingly beautiful Chicago. We started out talking about change. We're not done. I think one of the things, and this is like just 2 seconds, this is almost like an ad. I'm going to give you a commercial here. In 2000 and I think it was 1 or 2, National Geographic named the Chicago River as one of the 10 most endangered rivers in the United States. It was so dirty. And we didn't even know we had the space. You can see we ignored it. We didn't even know we had a Riverwalk. I'm involved in a program now being headed up by the Metropolitan Planning Council. And what we are trying to do with the backing of Mayor Emanuel and a lot of other organizations is create a vision for the river, for this great resource that we have. And it goes a step farther. It's not easy. It's not easy. One of the biggest issues about the river is water quality, of course. There's no easy answer to that. There probably are 3 different types of solutions. One is a redesign of our sewer system, which has been being worked on for years. When you hear about the deep tunnel or the reservoir system, Chicago was one of the very first cities to build a modern sewer system. But because they were one of the first ones, it's looking rather dated now. And it had one flaw that we can't seem to outlive. It was a combined storm sanitary, meaning that we didn't separate rainwater from sewage. And so when it rains hard, the sewage and the rainwater roll into our reservoirs. And if the reservoirs fill up into the river, and if the river fills up into the lake, and the bacterial pollution is the reason that the river is not swimmable and it's not drinkable. So we need to change that. So part of it would be to build a new sewer system. Part of it is new technologies. And another part is about treating the areas around the river in an ecologically and sustainable way. And that will be part of our report, part of the vision. And I just want to show you, some of them are really exciting. And to think ahead and see what would happen, I want to show you one of the sites we're working on. We're working on all these sites, but the one I want to show you is the collateral channel, which is in Little Village. And this, the south branch of the river is extraordinarily industrial. It's also extraordinarily polluted. And this channel used to serve industry. You bring your boats in there, offload things. Because the river is stagnant, because we're controlling the flow, and because we have a combined storm sanitary, the collateral channel has turned into not just an eyesore, but a health hazard. In fact, the people in Little Village call it Ass Creek. And I'm sure you can figure out why. The water's so stagnant. But one of the things about our report is we want to stretch. We want to stretch and see what this could mean to communities, what it could mean to making cities livable. So this is possible with the technology we have today. If we build a wetlands here, we can clean the water, and this is our vision, to actually make a swimming pool in the lake. That would serve Little Village. This section, you can't read this section very well, but I'll do it for you. This is the river, and this is the channel. So what we need to do is we need to cap. We have to cap the pollutants that are down there, and then we need to clean the water with our biological, with our plants, and then we will have a swimming pool. It's totally possible. So imagine that. So this is our future, and this is a change that I'm interested in. And if you want to know more about Great Rivers, go to MPC website and join us. I love Chicago. I want this to be a great place to live. That's the sort of change I'm after. Thank you.